Hi, it's Jen Healy, and I'm coming back with day 12, and I'm here in Maui. I am in Maui half the time, and so the rest of the videos will probably be recorded in these beautiful settings with the sounds of nature. And I wanted to talk today about the sense of belonging and fitting in, and why do I have multiple locations that I like to visit. I not only visit here, but I also live here, and I have chosen to live in a couple different places, and I'd like to explain why is that important to me, and why Maui and Marin, and what do I get from these places. But I also love to visit. I just came back from Sedona, and I go often up to Shasta. And why is it important for us to experience different energies, not only different people and different cultures, but it helps us see what has been conditioned into our reality and what is actually true for us. So wherever we go, we take ourselves. So I think that's an important thing to state as well. So some of the things that we might be changing location to move away from, they'll actually follow us. And that was some of my experience when I went from Philadelphia to Arizona for grad school and then over to San Francisco. Some of the things changed based on the environment, and then other things I was taking with me, and then I get to really challenge that. This whole challenge, the 30-day challenge, is about challenging our fears, and that's what I'm focusing on today in this chat. When we challenge our fears, we get to see what's really true for us, and we get to really understand more deeply who we are and what's important to us. So this sense of belonging, that's going to be the topic for today. Fitting in, and where do we feel at home? Where do we feel at home in ourselves? But where do we feel at home in our environments? And honestly, I've never really felt like I fit or felt at home anywhere. I cannot even remember the last time I really felt like, oh, this is home. It might be more resonant for me, but in my environment that I grew up in, I felt like a foreigner, even though it was an environment with people who looked like me or they were related to me. I didn't feel connected. I felt like I was from another planet. And so that was a really interesting experience. At one point, I could have swore that I was adopted. Right around 9-10 years old, I went through a little phase where I'm like, I must be adopted. I felt so different than everyone around me. And that's okay, but I have been wanting and moving towards the seeking, where do I most feel at home? And with the pandemic that just happened, that really hit home for me because I had moved 6 times in 2020. There was so much upheaval in my home front. And so I really had to dive into where do I feel most at home and where do I want to be? And because there were so many external fluctuations, I really had to come home to myself in a new way. I grew up in unstable environments where we moved around a lot, so having a sense of stability and security around my home and creating that space has always been really important to me. And when that went through some massive upheaval and change, I really had to give up that story that I needed that to feel comfortable and safe, and that I prefer it. And that contributes to my well-being, but it doesn't dictate my well-being. So that is something just over the last couple years I recently had to discover in myself, is how to be at home in my heart. As they say, home is where the heart is. And I was like, well, that's a beautiful expression. But now I feel much more at home in myself, but I also can ride the waves and be more in the flow. Instead of the unknown being so scary or paralyzing, then I'm trusting and letting things unfold and see what happens and allowing for greater than imagined to show up. But the one thing I have recognized reviewing my life is that I've always been taken care of in some capacity. It's looked very unusual, but Spirit reminds me that I've always been provided for. I've always had a home of some sort. It might look different than I was anticipating and hoping for, but that is also part of life, is to go with that we get what we need instead of what we want in some of these situations. So some fun facts about me. I did grow up in Philadelphia, as I mentioned, and then I went to grad school in Arizona, in Tucson, and then I moved out to San Francisco in '98, and that's part of what I'm celebrating with this series is my 25th anniversary of moving out to San Francisco, starting my company, changing my path entirely, and yet I've figured out and learned how to merge these worlds, merge these two different worlds that I come from. And so when I first arrived in San Francisco, it was the first feeling like, oh, I'm with my people, right? These are my people. And I loved living in Castro for a few years. I loved how expressive everyone was, and this idea of being more open and flamboyant and colorful, dressing up, dancing, all of that. And then as everyone is aware, things changed. The city changed. I changed. And so I eventually moved over to Marin in about 2001 and been over in Marin for about 22 years. And I love Marin, but why am I choosing Maui? So for me, I get different things from different people in different environments. We all do, right? And so what I get from Maui and this deep soul nourishment, that's why they call it the land of aloha, I really absorb and receive so much healing and so much information, so many of the codes from the waters, and I love nature and the tropical fruit and all of that. I love being warm. And then I love, with Marin, the mountains and the redwoods and that deep forest feeling. And it serves me. It serves me to have different environments to appreciate it. I love the diversity. Diversity is really important to me. And we all find what is our sweet spot, what really works for you, depending on the environment. Some people like the cold and like to go snowboarding, or skiing. And some people would prefer more of the summer sports or whatever activities. But we can have different environments that stimulate different parts of ourselves. And what I found about choosing to be here in Maui is that it's allowed me to drop more into my being. I tend to be more focused on my doing, my work, and my practices, my clients when I'm in Marin. And when I'm here in Maui, I get to really spend more time in my internal world, doing lots of recordings, doing lots of what I call the internal affairs for not only myself and my well-being, but also for my practices and companies. So I wanted to share a little bit about my world in terms of where I tend to spend time, and I really do love having the variety. And so for as long as I can, I'm going to keep that going. Challenging my fears is getting over whatever poverty consciousness that I grew up in. I grew up in really poor environments, and so the belief system like, oh, you can't do that or you can't have that was really deeply ingrained. And I really do, even today, have to challenge it and get creative and come up with creative solutions that are outside the norm, outside of the normal society thinking. So yeah, I wanted to just share a little bit about my practice and process of overcoming those fears by challenging them. So I usually ask myself, is this real? Is this true? Do I know it's true, or is this something that I picked up? Especially around what I call the prosperity paradigm or poverty consciousness. So much that we have been taught about our worth, wealth, money, that is so deeply ingrained into our choices that we don't allow ourselves to dream big or to really go for it and have more of an excellent life instead of just a satisfactory life, or mediocre life. So that's my inspiration for today, is to take the time to challenge those fears, act on them. That was the message I got first thing when I woke up from Spirit, is to act on the inspiration and what comes. We are here in a physical body to act it out, to take action. So even if it's in the smallest way, to do something scary or to challenge those parts of ourselves that are holding us back or keeping us blocked, it is really, really helpful. So I'm going to be broadcasting for the next couple weeks from Maui, and I look forward to sharing more beauty and more sounds of nature, and I'll be back tomorrow. I am going to go ahead and dive back into some of those other topics that I have been hinting to, and I look forward to it. Thank you for listening and watching. Aloha.